some of the questions. I will not take anything out of context. You know, I'll be very careful in how I do it, but if we're talking about a topic and then we end up getting back on that topic, I'm going to merge a lot of that so there's no confusion. I did that with Mr. Butler and those cases. First of all, this is a very interesting time to be in the healthcare business, is it not?
You know, it's been interesting to be in the healthcare business the entire time I've been in the healthcare business, but as times go, there's certainly a lot of uncertainties in our world, for sure. They tend to all run around the same thing, the structure of how healthcare is going to be paid for. Healthcare is very expensive, and it is very, very difficult for our economy to shoulder the costs of the healthcare, and that has been an ongoing battle as long as I've been in the healthcare business. Except when it's your family member that's ill, then you want everything that possibly can be done, and it's not a question of cost. So in the abstract, healthcare is too expensive on a global GDP conversation, but on an individual, when you have someone who's ill basis, then you need whatever you need done, and you want it done regardless of the cost. And so that's always, that push and pull is always a challenge.
Has the Affordable Care Act complicated that equation?
I think it's our latest round of uncertainties in healthcare. It's certainly added some different dynamics to the situation. I always say that if anyone can tell you how the Affordable Care Act is going to play out, they're either a consultant trying to tell you something or they have a political agenda. You know, I just don't see, I don't personally have a view of exactly where I think it's all going to go. I think there are just way too many uncertainties right now. Once every 60 years or so, you do have to fix the place up. That's one of my favorite quotes. The St. Francis has the infrastructure, was certainly in need of an upgrade, you know, many years ago. We had made some investments probably 15 years ago in the ER and the ORs, and you know, those infrastructures were very solid, but the main core of the hospital really hadn't been touched since the 70s, and so it needed a complete refurbishment. And you know, frankly, for what people pay for health care, they just don't want a roommate. The biggest single complaint we've always gotten at St. Francis the entire time I've been here has been about having to have a semi-private room. And in just a few more weeks, no one will ever have to complain about that again at St. Francis. We'll be an all private room hospital.
That's a change in culture and physical.
It's both. You know, and clearly the creation of the new Heart Hospital and the new Women's Hospital are, of course, huge deals for us in terms of facilities and services.
When you came to Columbus 8.5 years ago, what did you know about the city?
When the recruiter talked to me about the opportunity in Columbus, Georgia, I had to look it up on the map. I knew nothing about Columbus.
You were only 3.5 hours away.
I'd never heard of Columbus, Georgia before. I had the phone call that asked me if I would consider coming to interview here. And I hate to admit that, but it's absolutely true.
What do you know about Columbus now, other than everything that you didn't know?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, what's the one thing that sticks out?
What a hidden jewel it really is. You know, folks who, I always say, if you've lived here your whole life, you don't know how good you have it until you come here. You know, folks like myself who, you know, been other places, this is just an awesome place to live. The lifestyle here is great. The community is wonderful. You know, we have a lot of pluses. Sure, we have challenges and we have issues in our community, but this is a great place to live. And you know, one of the issues that St. Francis was facing years ago when I came was the idea that it was hard to recruit physicians to Columbus. It's not hard to recruit physicians to Columbus. If we can get them here for an interview and show them what we have, and I'm not talking about the hospital, I'm talking about the community. If we can get physicians here to see this community, we do a real good job of getting them to come here. And the breadth and depth of how deep that is in our community, how ingrained it is in our culture, that you know, folks just want to do the right thing and help the community have things it should not have. Frankly, the Butler Pavilion that we've just constructed would not have existed had it not been for the community support we had. River Center would not be here without the community support that we've had. I mean, you can just look around the community and all the different wonderful things that exist here that exist because, you know, folks have been so generous with their own personal resources. And, you know, it is way beyond anything I've ever seen. And I've lived, you know, in Fort Lauderdale where there's an awful lot of money and philanthropic activity, and there's nothing like Columbus. This is tremendous.
Let me see how to ask it. I'm going to the medical center, or Columbus Regional questions. So I'm gonna...
Didn't think you would have any of those.
I don't know where they come from. Columbus Regional and St. Francis have been incredibly competitive against each other historically over the years. Is that an accurate statement?
I wouldn't say incredibly competitive, but competitive. It's a competitive marketplace.
Have there ever been discussions to try to merge the institutions, or to get the two institutions working together on levels more so than what they're doing today?
You know, I think there's strong board leadership at both organizations that would love to see the organizations collaborate more than they do. You know, that is clearly something that we talk about a lot, and I'm relatively certain is discussed a lot across town as well. You know, part of the difficulty with all of that is the federal policy against antitrust and anti-competitive behavior that makes it really hard. I will say to you, we also collaborate more than some people realize. For example, we could not individually recruit a GYN oncologist to our community, but we did collectively. We actually have a GYN oncologist that works for both hospitals, and he sees patients in both facilities, and you know, that was a big deal 2 or 3 years ago, and now it's just kind of, we do it and it works.
Will we see more of that?
I hope so. I think cancer is an area where there is a natural collaboration between the parties that most people don't realize. The predominance of cancer surgery in Columbus is done at St. Francis. We have always been the cancer surgery hospital. The John B. Amos Center is a tremendous medical and radiation oncology cancer center. And the physicians who do surgery here and the medical and radiation oncologists at Amos have an outstanding collaborative relationship and work together very well. I would personally like to see that more formalized. It's a little challenging to figure out, but I think that's an area where we already collaborate well, and I think if we could figure out how to make it more formal, we could even take cancer care in our community to an even greater place than it already is.
If you could go back and get another degree in the medical profession as a doctor, as a nurse, is that something that you think you could do over and be a...
Oh, I don't think so. When I took biology in high school, I looked at the little frog that they wanted us to dissect, and I looked at the book, and what was in the book that was labeled and what I was looking at on the dissection table were not the same thing, and it was kind of gross. And so, you know, I kind of knew my limit fairly quickly, and we had a walk a mile. We do that once a year where you get a chance to do somebody else's job for a day. And I did a OR scrub nurse one day and went in, and number one, I couldn't keep up with them. They were running all over the OR. How much work they were doing was just amazing me. But when they had me standing next to an OR table watching a case, I knew that I reaffirmed my decision that I made in 9th grade that was just not for me. So, strong clinical people who know what the clinical side of the house needs and understand that there is not only a clinical element to what they do, but a service element to what they do. You know, one of the things that clinicians often struggle with is doing the clinical thing, but not necessarily understanding the customer service thing and understanding how to balance those two. And that is very, very important because people need both. They need the clinical care, but they also need to have that customer service piece to it as well. Strength of character. You know, they have to be very strong-willed. They have to know and have the strength in their own self to hold someone's heart in their hands. You know, that takes a certain amount of chutzpah that I don't have. You know, to be able to look inside a scope and look inside someone's head, you know, and know what they're looking at, and start taking scissors to things inside somebody's head. You know, that's a skill that and a level of inner strength that I don't have. You know, as you have risen through the ranks of hospital management, has your appreciation of that skill also developed? Oh, absolutely. There's no question that I've learned over, you know, my 30 years in healthcare to appreciate the inner strength that it takes to be a physician, and frankly a nurse as well, and a lot of other clinical professions that are having to sit there and hold, as a nurse sitting there and holding someone's hand that is dying and they know they're dying, but having to sit there and give them that compassionate support, that's heart-wrenching. And we have nurses who do that here every day, and that gives them a positive feeling about themselves, and that takes an inner strength to be able to do that.
What's the one thing people around you, under you, even your wife maybe don't understand about the most difficult part of your job?
Having to make the tough resource allocation decisions. I mean, that's always the one that I struggle with. You have so many different needs and so many different demands for things, and they're all really good requests. It's easy to weed out the ones that don't make sense. But you just can't do everything that everyone would want to do, and having to sit down and make those decisions and trying to build a consensus around, is that the right decision? I think that's the hardest part of my job. I try not to be a decision maker by fiat. I try to be a consensus builder, and it just takes a lot of time and energy sometimes to get everybody on the same page. If you're involved in something, you may have an opinion. So I may start with one opinion over here, but in the process of building the consensus, figure out my opinion was dead wrong. And so I always tend to have an opinion about things. Those who know me know that I'm not shy to have an opinion. So I probably have an opinion on whether I think we should turn right or turn left. The important part isn't that you have an opinion when you start out, it's that you have an open mind about listening to what your whole team is telling you and what your organization's telling you. And you want to be careful of not creating a horse built by committee, but you also want to make sure that you keep your team all brought together. It's all part of that culture of one, and really working hard to get everyone on the same page. And that's not to say that that means we're always unanimous in what we do. We're certainly not. But we try to get a consensus. Doesn't mean unanimity, but it does mean a strong group of people all seeing it the same way.
Okay. So, you're a hockey player. Oh, that's great.
Well, he's my little hockey guy, yes.
So, do you play in the adult league here?
We do. We have the city has graciously provided the community with a nice ice rink, and I've been playing since I was a kid, and played in the adult league here since it started.
So you're a skater or an enforcer?
I used to be a skater. Now I'm the big fat guy that stands in front of the net and tries to tip the puck in. It's about the only place in town where I'm not the St. Francis CEO, because they generally just don't care. They'll knock me on my butt just as well as anybody else.
Are you on the same team with Scott Ferguson?
Not this year. We've played together and we've played against each other. We've often suggested that maybe it'd be fun to have the two CEOs drop the gloves and go at it, just to see if we couldn't make the paper on that.
He's got the reach on you, I would think.
Yeah, but I'm bigger than he is. I got the weight.